Let's go into the conditions. So these are things you do before you start the project, while you're doing the project, and after you're done actually to set up your next project. So the first kind of team of things I've put together is people. It is all about people, all about your team and yourself as a project manager. We're talking about soft skills, training and certifications, and finally team ethos. So let's go and talk about soft skills a little bit. Very quickly, these are traits like leadership is a big one. There is a lot of literature around leadership and there's a lot of discussion around leadership. Emotional intelligence. When we say emotional intelligence, we mean having empathy for our team, for example, having empathy for the end user, understanding what they need, being patient with understanding what they need, for example. Then communication is a big one. How well can I communicate with my stakeholders? How well can I communicate with my project team? Does impact project success a lot. So all of these things, all of these skills enable project professionals to collaborate effectively with team and with their stakeholders, right? So this is a very quick definition of what soft skills are, let's say. Then how are they connected to success? How do they connect to successful projects? So what literature and research has found is they connect in these 5 ways. And I'm simplifying a little bit for the sake of this presentation, but these are the 5, let's say, themes of things you can find in literature. Team building. So collaboration is much better when you have good communication, for example, or when you have empathy and you can understand the challenges that your team faces. So you can build a better team. Then handling uncertainty. So when things happen, like a pandemic, for example, happens, there is a lot of uncertainty for businesses and all organizations, government, for everyone. So when there is uncertainty, having good communication bridges with your team, for example, with your stakeholders is really, really important because you can get the information in, you can analyze it, and then you can communicate your decisions, for example. Planning and executing projects, again, having good leadership skills, in terms of making the tough decisions during your project is very important in execution, for example. And good communication and good teamwork is very important for planning. Then client satisfaction. Why? This is something that is not straightforward in my opinion. But when you have good communication with your client and when you have empathy and you can listen to them and really understand what they need, then it leads to client satisfaction because you deliver what they want, basically. And finally, mitigating conflict. In my opinion, that's a really important one when there is an issue in the team. If you have good leadership and communication skills, then you can find a way around these challenges and these issues. Now, some recommendations. I think this is really interesting for you as future project managers. What do I do? Is the question, okay, the discussion is great. All of these things are great about the theory and what happens, but what do I actually do in my everyday practice? One thing is there are soft skills training sessions. And I'm not necessarily saying spend a lot of money. Perhaps some of you might already run small businesses or might, set up and start small businesses. You don't necessarily need to spend a lot of money in training. If you want to spend money, do that, but you can Google things. I keep saying that to all of the students in my seminar. You can find information online, on how to run some of these things in house, training sessions. And then I think it's really important when you interview someone for your team to try and discuss a little bit and find a little bit about their soft skills. Especially large organizations have a lot of these exercises. Those of you that apply for PwC or consultancies, they have a lot of tests and they do a lot of these questions in interviews. So keep that in mind when you interview people, right? Ask them about the soft skills, ask them about like leadership training they might have, etc. Now, moving on to the next one, training and certification. Now, these are activities like training sessions you might have inside the business. You know, a lot of organizations have inside training, so I might know something about a specific topic and I will train more people on how, for example, to use MS Project. You know, I'm a specialist in MS Project, so my department puts a training session together and I show another 10 people how to use MS Project. Amazing, really good. Then you have professional certification courses, basically things like the APM certification courses or Prince 2 or the myriad of agile courses that you have out there, risk management courses. There are a lot of things that outside organizations provide. You know, universities provide a lot of online learning now. You have whole courses, you have part-time courses. There are a lot of organizations that provide this type of certifications. And then you have two things, two elements that are really interesting for me, and I, in my opinion, very interesting to reflect on and implement them in businesses. So you have informal mentoring. So having a mentor means you have a kind of an informal relationship in the business with someone who is more senior than you, and you can ask them questions. For example, oh, I found this challenge in my project. There is a lot of conflict with this type of person. Have you seen this problem before? What can I do? And then they guide you on what to do. This is how informal mentoring can work in an organization. And then you have apprenticeships. Again, for example, you start, you are a junior member, and you might become an apprentice in a department and learn new skills. Or, for example, when you jump to a different department, you know, you might spend some time just learning the job, basically. Also offering apprenticeships to young students that you might want to integrate in your organization early on so they know the culture and they know how you operate. Right, now, how do they connect to success? Great question. Why should I care? Number one is enhanced communication. And the important thing here is you have a common knowledge base with the person. So if both of you, for example, have done some Prince 2 training, then you use the same terms for the same things. And that helps a lot in the communication. And a lot of industries are very heavy in terms of acronyms and in terms of how they call just everyday operations. So that definitely helps if you have a similar type of training. Then you have certifications acting as a filter. So when you recruit people, you can have a quick look at what certifications they have, if they have any. My opinion is that shouldn't be a block. If they don't have any, it shouldn't be a block. You should still interview them, but it can be a filtering system. And the importance of certifications in interviews does change depending on the industry. So knowledge-based industries like consultancies, for example, do seek these certifications. The government, for example, doesn't always seek certifications, especially when we talk about junior positions, right? So certifications and degrees can also act like this filter when you're looking at CVs to get people, to recruit people in your team. Now, recommendations. Some of the things we found in these research projects I've engaged with, some of the trends that are happening at the moment in large organizations, and the first one obviously has to do with COVID a lot, is blended learning. So blended learning is the idea that we combine online and in-person learning. You have some exercises and some content online, like the content we have for these lectures, and then you have some in-person. So for example, for this module, we could say that the online content are the lectures, and then the in-person are the seminars. So you have blended learning, and your employees and your team can engage with that when they want on their own time, for example, if it's online. Then mentoring. Mentoring, I mentioned before, it's all about creating these relationships with more senior people in the organization, and they basically kind of disseminate knowledge to you directly. And finally, work shadowing. And this is common again in some industries when you have junior people joining the team. You shadow for a couple of days or even weeks or a month someone who is more experienced, and you kind of look and take notes at how these people operate on a day-to-day basis. These are more important, obviously, in industries that there is a lot of risk, like the construction or the manufacturing industry. You work shadow someone, an engineer, for example, and see how they operate when they go and build a bridge or a building, etc. Now, the third and last condition in terms of people, we name team ethos. And basically, it's a set of values that the team has. And that includes respect for the other team members, transparency and honest communication in terms of what is going on in the project, because there are a lot of moving parts in projects. You might have a large team. Maybe I'm talking to the client, and maybe Fred is talking to the stakeholders, and we both need to be transparent in terms of how do these communications look. And finally, having a value towards collaborating, towards working with other people, sharing resources, sharing knowledge, sharing tips, sharing ideas, not being in your own silo. These are a set of values in project management that we found to be very important, especially respect and being honest and open about the information you have. Now, how do they connect to success, right? And there are two main ways that we found they connect to success. One is there is an alignment between the team members. There is an alignment between the team members and an alignment in terms of understanding why are we doing this project. So if you work in a government project, for example, building some infrastructure that is needed in an area, then understanding the needs of people is really important. Why are we doing this project? What are the values behind it? And number two is you create a shared vision for your team. There is a common goal, and you create a vision for your team to work towards when you have the same set of values. And you approach work in a similar way as well. Now, how do I practically do that? Team building exercises, and we don't necessarily mean some very classic and old team building exercises I really don't like. But what I mean by that is just getting around the table, discussing and workshopping your values with other people, getting ideas around the project, brainstorming how can you incorporate some of these values into your project and your everyday practice. These are important at the beginning, but also during the project life cycle. Then number two is have a lot of discussions with your team around the values of the project. If you really believe in your project, and you should believe in most of your projects, you should have a discussion with your team. What do you think about this? How can we make it align with our values more? And how do we implement these values? And finally, and this was the most important thing in the research we've done, as a project lead, as a project manager, you need to lead by example. If you don't incorporate these values of being open and being respectful and being collaborative with your team, then your team is not going to do that. Unless you lead by example, they're not going to follow these values. It's just going to be a piece of paper where, you kind of wrote and then it means nothing. You need to do these things in order for your team to also follow you.